Great, I'll go ahead and get started. First, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping items. As you might have seen in the corner, we are going to be recording the webinar, and everyone should be receiving a recording of this webinar in the next few days, as well as PowerPoint. So if you missed anything, you'll have a copy of this available to you. We'll send that out to you with the email that you registered for. So if you're here for our What If seminar series, which is hosted by the Center for Innovation and Population Health. We're here with Warren Nash. He'll be talking about entrepreneurship, and John will go into that a little bit further. But just to let you all know, the webinar will be about 45 minutes, presentation about 30, and some time for questions after. We'll also have a survey available for you to take after the webinar, so you can share your experiences. And we also ask that during this webinar that if you have any questions, direct those to the Q&A, and we'll get those answered then, and those will be answered at the end of the presentation. But that's all I have. Thank you for joining us, and I'll take it over to John.
Thank you, Diamond. Let me echo Diamond's welcome. I appreciate you all coming to the IF seminar series. You know, the IF Center is dedicated to supporting innovation, and innovation comes from cross-fertilization of ideas. And one of our mandates is to integrate across all the different 16 colleges of the University of Kentucky to create synergies of ideas. And so we invite people who have worked in different areas to talk about their work so that it might inform your work. So today, we are honored to have Warren Nash speak. And so Warren is the executive director of the von Allmen Center for Entrepreneurship, as you can see up on the slide, which is a very active group at the University of Kentucky supporting the development of entrepreneurs locally and nationally. He was, prior to this, he was the director of the Lexington office of the Kentucky Innovation Network, and he had a distinguished career in government, working in the cabinet, the Kentucky Cabinet and the Commonwealth, both as the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Commercialization and Innovation and the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Financial Incentives. So Warren's going to talk about entrepreneurship. And so just to remind everybody, the way we do these seminars is we don't connect the dots for you. So Warren's going to talk about entrepreneurship. And the idea is that you think about what he says in the context of what you do. And for those of you who are faculty at the University of Kentucky or wish to become faculty, we think actually you're an entrepreneur, whether you know it or not. You may mean not looking for money, but you're looking for something, and you have to create, you're a startup, and you get a little bit of resources, you get a salary, you get an office, you get a computer, and then you have a teaching load, and then what are you going to do? And that's a startup. And so we think actually thinking about how entrepreneurs approach their work might be useful in other ways about how people approach their work and maybe how you approach your work. So it's my great honor. Oh, I should tell you that Warren is a lawyer, so be careful what you say in chat. No, I'm kidding. So he's mostly worked in commercialization and business corporate law. So I think you're safe. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Warren. Thank you. And we look forward to your thoughts.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me. It gives us an opportunity to, have dialogue about what we do in the von Allmen for entrepreneur. That's a big word. Center for Entrepreneurship. And, I'm hoping that at the end of this session, people will get the understanding that, wow, it's not that different than an entrepreneur. Some of the things that what they have to go through, I go through in my research and in my lab. So that's the context in which we will be working. I want to start out, though, with talking about the von Allmen Center just a little bit. It won't be too long, so you understand what's available to you on campus. We're part of the College of Business and Economics. One of our focus is to expand entrepreneurial focused initiatives and programs, and it's open to undergraduate and graduate students, faculty, and staff. And we also, which is kind of interesting, we actually reach out to the community and have involved the community in many of our programs. So you get a nice mixture of UK community and the community at large. And so it's a great opportunity for outreach. We conduct the Entrepreneurs Bootcamp, which I'll talk about in my next couple of slides. We conduct workshops, lunch and learns similar to what we're doing here today that focus on entrepreneurial issues and issues related to startups that they need to deal with. And we do those throughout the year. We actually conduct pitch events targeted at all kinds of constituencies across the campus. Our most recent one we just launched 2 days ago is we're taking application for the Wildly Possible pitch competition, which actually takes place in the summer. We're already taking applications now. Last year we had 150 applications we had to weed through. So we started a little early taking the applications so we could read through them and pick the top 5 that actually compete for $15,000 in funding. We partner with organizations outside the university, such as Commerce Lexington, and many of y'all heard of Awesome Inc., to do events with them and to keep that continual connection to the community, which is important. Entrepreneurship is you need all the players in the room. You can't just do it on your own. You do need to be open, and that's what we try to do with these programs. We also have a stable, is the way I like to do it in Kentucky, so we'll call it stable, of mentors that are available to mentor students and our community members, even if it's an idea that's not quite mature to the point of thinking about a startup. These are individuals that we can call on to help mentor you and talk you through what you're working on. And it's been a very valuable resource to have. They cut across all factors of the industry. And as again, for people that we work with, this is available to them. The boot camp. We're currently in the middle of a boot camp too. We got 1.0 and 2.0. We're offering it now in the fall and the spring. And it's also offered for EXP academic credit, not only for business students and undergraduates, but for graduate students. We've had several graduate students bring an idea or work on a team. They're looking to expand their skill set. They want to be a better presenter. They want to be able to know how to network. So those are things that we open it up to the entire community. It's nice that we have the academic credit, and you can join and not take it for academic credit. This is just available to those who want to do an EXP experience. It's open to everybody. It's open to UK students, researchers, staff, and the community. We could have a community team that comes up with an idea that actually has a couple of students on it working, and they learn so much from the entrepreneur. And sometimes they'll be part of the company down the road should it be launched. We work on real world projects. These are not make-believe case studies. These are people's ideas that they've come up with that they're trying to commercialize and move into the market. And when we have people come as team members, we try to emphasize with them, it's in our handbook, this is a real life project. And we really are expecting you to, they're going to rely on you to help them through some type of research. It's very important because this is going to be their livelihood. This may be a startup company. And again, you might be part of that. We talked about the mentors already, both UK and the community. I said 80 there, we actually have 90. And we worked through something called the business model canvas, which I'm going to talk about a little bit further in my presentation, and investor pitch deliverables. For those who are going to raise money, we get them ready for that point. When it's the right time, that's the key point, is when do you pull the triggers to raise money? Do I bootstrap this for a while? And we'll be talking about some of those funding sources toward the end of the presentation as well. Opportunity to compete in regional, national competitions. We have a competition going on this weekend that's been on by Gatton College of Business. It's the PNC Business Summit and Wildcat Pitch. So we have 2 teams, I think, and one in the undergraduate and then one I've been coaching in the graduate program. An opportunity to receive funding that is exclusively only for boot camp teams. Sometimes we have funds that we can provide for prototyping, for customer validation, business modeling, revenue modeling. It's not every year, but some years we have some money available that we can actually provide to boot camp teams to put toward their idea. To date, 34 companies have been formed out of the boot camp. We're just finishing our 6th cohort for the year, and it's exciting to know that there are actually companies that are at various stages, but they did form companies coming out of the boot camp. This is one of my favorite diagrams. It comes from the Business Model Canvas book. We talked about the Business Model Canvas in a few minutes. My brain looks like this many times on the left-hand side, a little scrambled, trying to think through ideas, but that's the same for entrepreneurs and for researchers. You know, you're at that research stage, you're trying to develop that. Entrepreneurs then try to put together a proof of concept or a prototype that they can take and show to potential customers and get feedback. And then, of course, you're into the design or the actual business modeling after that. It's important to note that a lot of people, this is very interesting, we're talking about fundraising, they want to come to investors at this stage. I don't think so. And people are not going to invest in if you don't have a clear path of what you're where you're going with the idea. So I put this up there because we're going to revisit it later, but just a symbolic picture of what I think both researchers and entrepreneurs go through. What is an entrepreneur? It's an individual who's undertaking the risk associated with creating a business and owning a business. They're willing to take on that risk. And it's not for the risk averse. It's for those who are willing to put it out there, think outside the box, and to hopefully be successful with their venture. Personal characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. I got carried away with animations on this, so I'll apologize in advance, but here we go. Persistent. They don't give up. They're persistent. They have a problem with what they've developed. They're persistent to try and develop a solution to that. So that's important. And that's a characteristic that both researchers and successful entrepreneurs share, is to be persistent. Creative. And this is important, that you're able to, if I'm going to use this phrase, to think outside the box. Look at it from a different angle. Get outside your comfort zone when you're working on something, because you may come up with another avenue or another solution to a problem that you didn't realize. Responsible. These folks are people, because especially for entrepreneurs, they are responsible because if they do take investors on, they're going to own a responsibility back to those investors and to their fellow shareholders. So that's important, that they have a keen sense of responsibility. Inquisitive. It kind of goes along with persistent, that you're always looking at it from a different angle. You're curious. Could we go this direction with it? Should we be adding this to the product? Should we be developing the app first, and then do we go after users, or do we go after customers? There's two different distinctions there. So they're always inquiring as to what is next in their business model and their planning. Flexible. I can't emphasize this enough. You can't be wed to the idea. You've got to be able to be flexible in case there are other avenues to explore, other ways of looking at the problem. So the flexibility is a key factor in successful entrepreneurs. Go oriented, and that's important, that you set goals for yourself in the beginning. You also got to be ready to change some of those goals. As you're starting to develop, you may do some validation with customers and find out this doesn't work. They're not interested in this. They're not interested in the way you approach this. So you've got to have a goal that you can know that you're going to go back and relook at that, and you establish new goals based upon your pivot at that point. Independent. There, you don't have someone holding something over you. You're doing it yourself because you're interested in this happening. You will potentially have, if you bring on equity investors, you will have a board that you report to, but you've got to be independent in your thinking. You there won't be someone giving you tasks and say, you got to complete that task. You've got to figure that out and be independent through the process. Self-confidence. They've got to believe in themselves, because if they don't believe themselves, it's going to come across in their presentations when they're presenting an idea to not only to potential investors, but to customers. When you're presenting, you've got to come across as self-confident, you know what you're talking about, and you're always open to questions, but you still come across as being confident in what you're talking about. Risk taker. Now, this is very key for entrepreneurs. A lot of people are not risk takers. It's a challenge for them. Many times, especially for an entrepreneur that's putting a new product or service, they may have to put some money in themselves, of course, And they may actually have to provide some kind of security for that. They're taking a risk that if this doesn't go through, that collateral is going to be, going to be gone. So risk taking is very key and usually a characteristic of successful entrepreneurs. If they're not willing to take a risk and they want to stay at the status quo, more than likely they're not going to be successful. And coachable. I can't emphasize enough how important this is. I know from an investor standpoint, when they get to meet the key people, the founders, the inventors of the technology, they're going to gauge whether they're coachable. They're going to ask questions and see if this person is willing to listen to others' ideas, maybe implement those ideas if it's validated that those work. For those who are not coachable, many times they're not going to gain investment because investors know, if they're not going to listen to what we have to say, because really your investors, you want smart money, they're bringing their own expertise to the table. You've got to be able to be open and be coachable. Similarities between entrepreneurs and researchers. And it's going to go back and kind of pick up some of those characteristics. Innovative thinking. It's key for both entrepreneurs and researchers. They look out for new opportunities, technologies, and methods to grow. They want to grow. The growth is important. They're not afraid of growing, trying new things, and looking at it from a different perspective. Even if they're, well into the development of the product, there might be something that they need to really look at for the market to accept that product when it's launched. So they got to continue innovative thinking. Doing for innovation. Both entrepreneurs have to have the confidence that they achieve success and willingness to fail. They take the leap of faith. They leap out there on faith. And the key thing I want to point out in the very first sentence, that willingness to fail, there are probably as many ventures that fail that are succeed, probably more ventures that fail than succeed. Again, that's the risk taker, but you might learn from that, and they may be able to pivot or take that learning into another idea or into another project. Always learning, open to new thoughts and ideas. They got to be ahead of the game. They got to be able to pick up new information from their customers when they're talking to them, from the marketplace, and attain new skills. Those new skills, for many of our folks, they aren't business individuals. They are the researchers. So they need to gain some type of competency in business skills and be able to know at least some of the basics of business. There's also skills about creative thinking and as far as marketing. Those are all skills that you will be learning as an entrepreneur in your startup. Again, I think it applies to the people in the research lab and people doing research as well. Flexibility, we talked about a minute ago. Things don't always go as planned or as you expect. The entrepreneur, if the entrepreneur and researcher are not flexible with workload schedules, their ventures and launch may not even happen. It might not get off the ground if they're not flexible in looking at what they're working on and not be too wed to the idea, that they're open to ideas of how to improve it or where it's lacking or a better way to market it, a better way to put it into the marketplace. They need to be able to think on their feet and go with the flow. And finally, no giving up. Both the entrepreneur and the researcher will face failures as they're going through the process. And sometimes those failures are more than successes, but you learn from those failures. If you don't learn from those failures, it's really sad because those failures may teach you what to do the next time you go to this research or when you're working on this project. And they need to be persistent again, as we said at the beginning, but you just can't emphasize enough that failures are learning times to learn. We actually, a couple of years ago, had a failure party for our startups that had failed. Yeah, we actually partied that. We actually celebrated those failures because at least they took a risk and they put it out there. And several got up and said, well, now that I learned this, I'm going this direction. And if you're going to fail, you've heard this phrase before, you want to fail early. I think your investors would appreciate that too, that you fail early. And as much work as you can do on your dime before you go to investors, the better off the entrepreneur is. Skills needed by successful entrepreneurs. Communication is key. Some entrepreneurs are not very good at communicating. They've got to be able to communicate to their entire team. If I have an engineer that's the CEO, I will find they're great at tinkering with the idea, developing the idea, but communicating that idea, whether it's to fellow team members or to a potential customer, there's some skill sets that they have to work on to be able to know how to communicate to those different audiences. Human relations skills, got to relate with each other. You know, you don't operate in a vacuum. You've got people on your team that you've got to be able to work with, understand their way of learning, the way they experience things. And who knows, between the two, you complement each other with the way that you think about the problem that you're trying to solve. Again, I got carried away. I want to make sure you're awake. Problem solving and decision-making skills. They got to be able to take on the problems, not shy away from those problems, and be able to make a decision. You can't sit there, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do. You've got to be decisive. You've got to take that risk and to try maybe a new avenue with the product or the idea. So that's why both of those are important skills. Technical skills, yes, depending on what they're dealing with, if it really is opportunity, if they are going to develop software, that they have some software development skills. However, we have more ideas come into our boot camp with a software piece or an app piece, and guess what? None of the founders know how to code or do any type of that type of development. That's where they got to build their team. That's where they got to bring people in. Maybe they work for equity. So, but you do have to have the technical skills, or at least be able to obtain the technical skills through other resources or other avenues to work on the product. So we're back to my favorite picture. This is where over to the left, got an idea. And hopefully by the time you get to the right, that idea is really fleshed out and you can move forward into the marketplace. If you're doing research, you're about to complete that research or you're further along in that research. Okay, I mentioned before the business model canvas. The business model canvas is a tool that we use in our boot camp. It's actually, you can find it online, Google business model canvas, and you actually will find this canvas out there, and it's actually for public use. And it talks about the key pieces that people need to think about when they're dealing with creating a business. So many times they can come enthralled with the technology that they don't spend as much time on the business model or the revenue model. How are you going to get to distribute this out into the marketplace? They don't spend time looking at those things. You get the greatest technology, but if you don't know how to get it out the door, it's going to be kind of one of those failures that come along. You got to know your customer segments, your customers. Customer relationships are important. So that is one side of the equation. In the middle is the value proposition. What value are you bringing to the table with this product or idea? How is it different? And then we'll go back down to the right-hand side. We got channels and revenue streams. Channels are how you're going to get to the market, what channels you're going to work through to get the product into the market, and then revenue streams are how you're going to make money. Then we got the key activities that have to happen. What are some of the key activities? Do you need to patent something that you developed? Does it need copyright? Does it need trade secret? Key resources, again, back to the team that's got a great idea. They may be able to do wireframe development of the app, but they really don't know how to code it. So you've got the key resource that they need is our developers, and developers that have experience developing apps in the field that they're trying to launch the product into. And key partnerships, strategic partners are very important to have. Who can I partner with? Because your partner could be someone that invests in you and your company, and for the research, invest in your research. They may be a user, but they also may be an investor into the product. They may like it enough that they put money into it as well. And then I know the left hand, I kind of skipped over cost structures. The cost of putting this endeavor together, the cost of goods that go into the product. What is the cost of goods of marketing that you can get to the point of what your profit is going to be, cost of goods, and then your net profit after the cost of goods. So just to repeat, the middle, which is your value proposition, is the what. What are you going to do? This could be where your idea is as far as a researcher. What kind of research am I going to do? Where do I head with this? Who am I addressing with this technology or with this research? Who am I going to approach? Who are my customers? Who are my customer segments? Who are my channels that I'm going to work through to get the product into the marketplace? How? On the left-hand side, how am I going to get there? What do I need? What are the key resources that I need to get to that point? That's important that you know how and have a plan on how you're going to get there. That may change halfway down the road, but at least you've got this plan you can go back to. This plan should be flexible, should be open to change. And then more importantly, especially for the entrepreneur, is how much is it going to cost and how much am I going to make? And that's the bottom line everybody wants to get to is how much am I going to make, but how much is it going to cost me and what is my net profit going to be? And investors are going to want to know you know your numbers and how you're going to get there because they want to see when potentially, if they invest, when is the exit going to happen for them? When will they be out of the deal because you've been successful? This is very true for probably research as well. How much is it going to cost me to do this research? If I need special equipment, I factor that in. And then that's when you have to work at the resources. Where do I go after for those resources to obtain that equipment? Startup funding. This may not directly relate, but I think you'll find it interesting about how the different stages of startup funding. Across the top, you've got idea creation, pre-revenue, break even, and growth. Those are the stages of the company. Down below is what happens. You get idea and IP protection important. Pre-revenue is prototype and business plan development. You need to spend as much time on the business model as you do on prototyping the product. Or have people on your staff or on your team that have the ability to take on some of these responsibilities and can maybe be working on the prototyping while you're working on the business model. In the break even, you've got beta customers. It's still a beta version of the product, but you're selling and you're making some revenue, which that's what investors are looking for. Is that they like that when they see that you've not only have a product that people are willing to pay, but you've proven your business model. It does work. The way I want to put this in the marketplace does work. And that's as important to them as the technology is. And then the best is growth is paying customers and a growth plan or how you're going to scale up. That's a key. Now let's see where the funding comes in at each of these stages. The beginning could be friends, family, founders, and always put in there the fools. But these are people that believe in you, believe in what you're doing. They have some experience with you, or the founders believe enough that they're putting their money into it. In fact, many times an investor will ask, well, what are you putting? What money have you put into it? We know you get sweat equity in this. What funding have you put into it? Have you bootstrapped some of these costs? They're always very impressed when founders do that. And so that's important. And that's important that you do because it shows that you're dedicated to this idea of taking this idea through the various stages and take it into the market. And that's usually at your creation stage or your pre-revenue stage. In Kentucky, there's a match program under the federal, first there's the federal program of SBR TTR match, and Kentucky matches those dollars. These are a proof of concept many times, developing the research that goes into the product. The state matches those dollars. If you look at it's SBR.gov, it'll have the various agencies that do put out solicitations for SBIRs and STTRs. And if you receive one of those grants, then Kentucky has a match to match it at phase 1 and phase 2. And investors like this funding because by the time you've utilized this funding, you have actually proven the concept, may even have the product ready to launch in the marketplace. It means their dollar doesn't have to go into proof of concept, but now can go into scaling up the company. There's some state investment funds for startups. Commonwealth Seed Capital offers those funds or equity funds. Crowdfunding, you might be familiar with Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform where people take what they've developed and they put it out there early, probably at the creation of the idea or pre-revenue, and they come up with ways to reward. This is also a donation-based investment. They put out there for certain stages, people who give this much, get this benefit. Or maybe if they give this much, they get the first product and it rolls out. So it's a way of creating funding for yourself. At the same time, it's a way also to test your product because you're going to put that out there to them for them to hopefully donate to the cause, but also you can show whether your product really is appealing to them. Is it something that the customer wants to buy? You do a lot of discovery with it. And with a lot of companies that have raised money that actually will go through a crowdfunding to actually get feedback on the product or service itself. Angel investors. We have a very strong angel community here in Lexington and in the state. The Bluegrass Angels are the angel investors for this region. They invest at the pre-revenue and break-even stage. They like it being a little bit more closer to growth if possible, because what they want to do is to usually invest in scale up. Now, depending on what you're developing, if it's a pharmaceutical or a medical device, they understand they may have to invest a little bit earlier in that particular product because it takes more funds to get that done. But they don't expect a greater return. If it's an app or software piece, it may not take as long, and they're going to see that you actually have beta users of the software or the app, and then they're going to have their money would come in to help scale up the idea or the product. Strategic partners I talked about come in and they can come at the break-even point or growth, and they may like the product. They want to incorporate the product into their inventory of products. And so that's interesting. You need to get strategic. It could actually be a competitor that you all eventually work together on the idea or the product. Venture capital is different from angel investor. Venture capital, they take control of, more control of the company, are making larger investments. And if you notice, they invest in a much later stage. They do not invest in creation or pre-revenue. They may do a little break even, but they're really the growth. They put in the major investments for growth and scalability of the company. Customer sales are the best thing. When you show customer sales, you get some of these other people come on board because you do show customer sales. You've proven that the technology is something someone wants to buy, and you're proving your business model. And then the last thing we put out there, if you need cash, I want to say fluxion of cash, infusion of cash. That's what I want to say. Infusion of cash. Banks are available, but they're a tough audience. They're a tough audience to work with, depending on where you are in the stage of the company. You're going to be more likely to be able to get some type of financing from a bank when you're further down the commercialization pipeline toward that break-even or growth stage. So now we'll take the types of financing. Let's just talk about the pros and cons. Across the top are the sources. The next is going to be the pros and then the cons. Okay. Grants. Let's look at that. Federal state agencies, foundations. The pros is that there's no payback. They might have some expectations that you produce some type of research or produce some type of early stage product, but there's no payback. You're not going to have to pay it back. They're going to invest in and be alongside you. It's non-dilutive as well with the grants. They're not normally taking any part of the company and when they're providing a grant. And you get to keep control with this. At that point, get to keep complete control with grant funding. So those are the pros. The cons, it's a very lengthy process. When I talked about SBRS TTR, it is a lengthy process. And you all have dealt with this. It's not an easy process, highly competitive. Many times it's technology-based. So some of our consumer-based product companies will not be eligible for these types of grants. And there's loans and debt that we talked about. That's your banks, your credit cards, and you might take a loan from friends and family. I think that's to be cautious of that, and I'll explain more why in a minute when I talk about investment in equity. It is still non-dilutive. The bank is not taking a piece of your company, but you get to keep control of the company. But in the next one down, you are going to have to pay some type of interest, and security or collateral is going to be required. And they may be able to give you a line of credit, on a credit card for early stage spending without giving up collateral, but more likely you're going to provide some type of collateral for any type of investment but providing of funds from a bank. Investment in equity, that's your angel investors, then your later stage venture capital, in-state programs that work alongside those, and friends and family. This is, I always forget about the bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is also there as well. You're paying money out of your pocket. But the friends and family, I always remind people when they do with friends and family, you need to document just as much with them if you would as an outside investor. Because friends and family, while they may believe in you, come Thanksgiving, grandma's going to be sitting across the table from you, and she's going to say, "Where's my money? What's going on?" That's tough. Grandma's tougher than probably any of these other folks. So it's great money to obtain. They believe in you, but you really need to think of it as formally as if you were taking investment from outside, because it's going to be people that are going to have an expectation. With angel investors, you're looking not only for the money, but for the shared risk, the smart money. They have experience in the field you're trying to go into. They have expertise in that field, or they have expertise that can help you in your development of your company. An attorney, so they can help to actually put the pieces together for the company, help to choose which type of entity you form. So it's important that they not only get money, but you have smart money that comes into this. Here's the con: it's dilutive. You are going to give up a part of your company, and you are going to give up control. And then with revenue, the sources are customer sales, and then, sometimes sales don't have to be huge sales. You may start out with your beta with a small amount of sales, but you're proving the business model. As you develop different versions maybe of the software, the app, then you're able to put that out there for higher rates of payment for that service. And those sales are important. You needed to be able to figure out if you can do sales at various stages of the company. The pros, there's nothing better. You're not giving up control. You've got the product out the door. There's no equity given away. And there's nothing better than revenue. And the cons, unless your product, you're not ready to service that product and provide customer service, there really are no cons to that. I think it's important. Well, that's the different types of financing. And with that, I actually have gotten to the end of my presentation. I hope that you've learned a little bit about entrepreneurs and how it applies to you as a researcher. But I'm glad to take questions at this time.
Thank you, Warren. That was great. And I was just sitting there thinking while you were talking, when we first started talking about this, I really, in my head, was thinking predominantly about the research enterprise in the university. But as I'm listening to you speak, it seems to me like it also applies to, like, if you're thinking about designing a course, or if you're thinking about a degree program, or if you're thinking about a certificate program, or we're in the process of thinking about a certificate program. And I think some of the logic that you were laying out makes a whole lot of sense. You've got a what, a who, and a why. So I don't know if you wanted to make any comments about how this might apply to
I agree with that, because who's your customer, especially with the course development, the students.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know your students and what they're looking for? What skill set are they looking for to take into the workplace or into the marketplace? So yeah, I really think the business model canvas can apply to anything. I mean, it's a way of thinking. And with your value proposition on your course, what is it that's going to really catch the student's attention in this course? It's going to really get them interested and hooked into to the course and really put their time and effort into it. So yeah, I think it's applicable, very much so.
We're open to any other questions?
So right now, sir, we don't have any. I went ahead and asked if anyone had any questions to go ahead and type them in the chat box or in the Q&A. So if anyone has anything, we have Victoria, who looks like she raised her hand.
Why don't you make Victoria a presenter?
Yes, my question, and this is because Dr. Lyons makes on a statement of when you are going to design a course. I just finished my master's in instructional systems design, and I'm thinking of building a course to teach statewide for my grant that I had the Kentucky Children Health Insurance Program and the principal investigator. So I'm in the phase right now that I need to build that. So I would like for you to expand a little bit when it comes to if we build it, because once you build a product, either the university might be benefit. Of course, the university will benefit, but will you be able to explain us a little bit more? And maybe Dr. Lyons and Dr. Warren might know.
Well, I've got to give something away here, Victoria. When I heard that your name, I knew this was going to be you. Victoria, tell the audience what you've participated in the last year.
Wow. Well, it was amazing, but this
Went through both boot camps, right?
There were 2 boot camps. Yeah, the first boot camp was to bring in a new idea, and the new idea was to start your own business. And it was in my senior year, and I had developed e-learning through my master's in instructional systems design. In my e-learning, it was the product that I was thinking of, perhaps because I developed as a graduate student, perhaps I can go ahead and start my own business. So I signed up and registered with this idea in mind, and they took me. One of the amazing things and best reward, and a person that is very timid to speak, well, there's no room to be sitting quietly, even if you have ideas and thinking on yourself. There was a lot of pitch, a lot of training for the pitch. There were a lot of presenters from different people that they already start out the business. But the pitches and the feedback that Dr. Warren, that he was my mentor as well as my supervisor, they walk you through. And my name of my company is 21st Century. And it was it's hard to describe. As I was going through the training of the boot camp, I was thinking to myself when I was making the pitches about my background as a program investigator for the Migrant at Risk program, and how similar it is that you cannot give up, that you always have to constantly be ahead, thinking in the customer or the clients, the people that we help. In other words, you cannot retain a grant. Right now, the grant that I retain is on my own since 2016, but I've been working in that grant since 2001. And you constantly have to develop new initiatives, because in other ways, the competition is ferocious and you can lose that grant. Somebody else is going to come up and offer better. and also that you have to always keep very close in contact to your sponsors. Those are the ones that are giving you the money. And if you have to listen very carefully, always keep them in touch. Every time you make a new move for your grant, something that you bring new, you always have to listen. So, but anyways, I don't know. All I know is it was amazing. And I'm sure I can say more, but.
I would tell you that Victoria ticks off many of those characteristics that we talked about for successful entrepreneurs. One is that she is persistent. You know, she does keep at it. And I mean, if I went through that, I could say she probably has every one of those characteristics. The challenge it was for Victoria, as we're talking, if it's okay, Victoria. Well,
that's okay, please.
It was the pitching
Yes.
and getting your, and this is going to be true, I think, many times. People are great at researching and putting things on paper, but getting up and explaining that to an audience and knowing the audience does take a skill set. So that's something to think about. Is that the boot camp does offer that, and we would love to have people come and join that.
So I was thinking about your comment, Victoria, about classes, and I'm trying to think whether, because you have to design your class to attract students, and that has to serve a purpose within a larger degree program or certificate program typically. And then I'm trying to figure out whether the university relative to the college is a venture capitalist or an angel investor. I'm not quite sure which it is, because you do have to make sure it fits within the university's business model as you create your own business model for the course. So it's interesting. You don't have complete control. So it's more like a venture capitalist, I think.
Well, it depends on the stage. I mean, it may be, it's probably a hybrid of both.
Right, okay.
Because at the stage that you're really early on, they do invest in, especially if it's, I always go back to the lab example, but they're working in the lab. That's their investment, is that lab. Because at the end of the day, as we all know, anything that's developed at UK on intellectual property is going to be shared between the inventor and UK. So they're really angel, but then down the road, they may put more money into it if it's got a commercial viability. So I think they'd be both roles.
Interesting.
All right, sir. So we have the next question from Jordan Constantine. He says, what are the biggest learnings from failure entrepreneurs have celebrated at failure parties?
I'm trying to think. Well, we had a game development company that developed a game they were sure would appeal to I think it was 18 to 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds. And they also focused a lot on the male demographic. It was to their detriment because I think they were short-sighted themselves in that they learned from their failure is that percentage-wise, women play games as much or if not more than men. And they had not really spent time working on that piece of the market. And then that's why they failed. But they learned. And now the next development, they know to look at the market completely, to do that, and do that. Who am I approaching? It's very important. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. We have another one from Brad Patrick. He says, Warren, can you describe how a new entrepreneur should connect with VACE or VACE? What should they expect when connecting? How does the process work? And in parentheses, he says, I have some students outside of Gatton asking me about how to connect.
Sure. We're an open door. Just because we're in Gatton does not mean that we only offer these services to College of Business students. As I've explained for all the different programs, they're open to the community. So how they get contact, our emails are on the website. And as far as specific opportunities like the Wildly Possible Pitch Competition, that's on our website that you can click and see if you're eligible for or would be eligible for by the time you pitched. Those are ways of doing it. When we're on campus, we're an open door. And as I said, our website's the best place to get to us. And I've answered many a question from people from out in the community and outside of it. Again, the key thing to remember is that Von Allmen Center is here to help all parts of UK.
Wonderful. We have another one from Brandon Howlett. Is there any particular reasons or poor habits that one should avoid that makes the pre-revenue or the valley of death?
Okay. The valley of death is the hard place. I really didn't explain that. It was on the chart. But valley of death is when you're really not quite ready to put it out there for sale in any form or manner. Yet you need some development. So I'm trying to get back to the question, Priest, of that. Where people kind of don't really pay attention is, where are they really in the development of the idea? Is it still so early that, you really don't go after even angel investing? This could be a bootstrap for a while until you can prove that it actually works. And that's a possibility. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but that's why it's called the valley of death. That's where many companies die, is between those stages.
Okay, so it looks like
He says you answered it.
Good. That's the attorney in me. I'm sorry. I went a long way to that answer.
You're good, sir. Stephen Shimshock was wondering if you could show the Canvas slide again, if possible.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back and share. I will do that. Hold on.
And while you do that, sir, I'll go ahead and read another question.
Sure.
So an anonymous attendee says that in TCOM, the products are trainings and tools that improve services within the framework of state, health, and human services bureaucracies, who are often the fundraisers. Are there any startup approaches / tools or mindsets that might be especially helpful for generating change in long-standing institutional practices? And if you'd like, I can read that again.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, do. I'm trying to.
Sure. The products are the trainings and tools that impact / improve services within the framework of health and human services bureaucracies, who are often the fundraisers. The question is, are there any startup approaches, tools, or mindsets that might be especially helpful for generating change in long-standing institutional practices?
Okay. It's a tough battle when things have been institutionalized in a way that it's been that way for a while. And I think it's talks like these that help us to get past that, is to think innovatively. And so if you can come in with what you're trying to and be very innovative, but appealing to those people that are funding. I think you said that they think the founders could be funders, or, you know, that's important that you are able to convey that thought and have something to back it up. And I think I got to the answer to your question.
Yeah, I think where it gets really interesting, Warren, is there's a distinction sometimes in bureaucracy. Well, you know, because you lived in this, you know, you have the political level of the appointees that come and go with administrations. Then you have the permanent bureaucracy that's kind of always there. And so it's kind of tough sometimes to know where your point of leverage is, you know, because if you're trying to figure out, okay, what product can I give them that helps them in their in work, you know, where do you enter the system and those kinds of things.
Well, you know, thinking along those lines, sometimes you need to know, when you say know your customer, there are going to be people in that institution that really think like you do. They're part of it. You've got to discover who those people are. Help to find a champion that the people that are making decisions on funding, trust that person, but at the same time, they're kind of in your camp of trying to think of a way to be innovative. You'd be surprised how many organizations has someone like that in the organization. It takes a little time. It takes some networking, spend time with people and get kind of their thought processes and how they think about things. And you go to them and say, help me sell this idea to, you know, this group. And that's something to think about.
Right.
All right, sir. So next we have a question from Lauren Schmidt. She asks, what advice would you give to someone fresh out of university who is not sure what direction they want to take and wants to explore becoming an entrepreneur? That's the first question. So I'll let you have that question and then we'll get to the second one.
Okay. First, I have to ask, are you a risk taker? You have to really examine yourself to say, am I willing to take a risk? Am I willing to hang in there even if it fails? So I think that's very important that you know that about yourself. Don't worry. A lot of people want to go in and their idea of creating a company is forming the company, forming an LLC, you know, or subchapter S corporation. And they've spent no time on developing the business model or perfected the technology. Your focus should really be at the beginning on your idea that you're wanting to move forward and talking to people, And people get real funny about this. They say, oh, it's my intellectual property. There are ways to talk to people without giving away the key piece, especially if it's software or if it's an app. They're not going to get the code or the source code, right? So you should be able to talk to them about it. So I think that's important where you're going, is that you're willing to talk and put out there your ideas and be ready to take favorable and unfavorable feedback.
So, Warren, do you think it's useful for folks like Lauren describing to try and link up with working with a startup, working with a different?
Oh, I think it'd be great.
Before they develop their own idea?
I think that would be, there are a lot of startups in Aztec building on campus where a lot of our technology-based UK startups are, but the community has the same thing. There's actually a newsletter, well, I don't think do that anymore. They used to put a newsletter out with job opportunities. But yeah, I think if you can, even if it's an unpaid for a period of time, you're going to gain so much knowledge by being actually in there with them, fighting, working, and, you know, facing those challenges. You get to see it firsthand.
Okay, and that may have answered the second part, but the second part was, are there some small steps they can take to get their feet wet without fully diving in before knowing for certain if they want to go down that road?
Well, that's right. I think it is kind of talking to people that have done that, have been through this, get a feel, and hopefully maybe actually work with them so you see what they go through every day, and you can make that decision, well, this is really not for me. You still might be a valuable team member. I don't want to rule that out, because there's something within a company, entrepreneurship, where you may be able to come up with ideas within that company to help improve their product. So you might have something to bring to the table. Just don't forget that.
Wonderful. So it looks like we have one more right now. So this is from Josh. I'm wondering, when you talk about knowing your audience / customer, what is the most important thing to know? And I'll finish the full question. Your story about the video game developers was interesting in that they thought they knew their customers, but actually focused on an unimportant element of that, gender. What should be focused on?
I cannot say this strong enough. It is important to do customer discovery, even early, even with it, if you've got it sketched out and you can show a picture of whatever the product is. If they had taken some time and really done the customer, they promised they spent time with customers that they were comfortable with, right? You got to be able to spend time with all the potential customers that are out there and get their feedback. Now, some you're going to take and use, and some you're not. You got to be able to decipher that. But customer discovery is key. It is as important as developing the technology, especially if you're trying to commercialize. There are technologies that are being developed because it's just good to do those technologies. They won't be commercialized. But if you're commercializing anything, you better spend time with your customer.
All right, Warren, it's 3 o'clock. So we really, really appreciate you coming and joining us.
Thank you.
Wish we could do it in person, but maybe sometimes aspirationally that's going to be in the future. But we really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your good work, and it's really it's fascinating. So,
well, I want to give you the website, vace.uky. Is it vace@uky.edu? vace@uky.edu. Pretty simple.
excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
So I do, Dr.